In this video, I am going to try and bust some of the jargon and explain the categories to narrow down your string search a little bit. Obviously, there's a huge number of choices out there and it can be a bit overwhelming. A lot of it does come down to personal preference, what suits your violin, your playing style, etc. I'm not going to get into that. That is a much more in-depth video for another day. This will hopefully just help you get started in the choice. So first thing to mention, gauges. Usually you will just want medium gauge. Thicker gauge is much louder but also slower to respond, and lighter gauge is obviously the opposite. It's quiet but quick. If you're unsure, just get medium. The same applies to string tension. You get light, medium or heavy, which directly correspond to thin, medium or thick gauge. Again, start with medium unless you've been given a specific reason not to. You probably just want medium. There are different types of violin strings, so I'm not talking about the brands or the names, the actual category. If you read for each brand, it'll tell you. Gut strings, they're the oldest type of string, kind of, I guess, the original. Sometimes also called catgut strings. They are actually made using animal intestines, but not actually cat, and apparently never has been cat, so I'm not sure why they're called that. They are said to have a really beautiful, rich tone. They're also known to be very difficult to play and to keep in tune. They're very subject to temperature changes and humidity changes and whatnot, affecting the tuning. These are definitely not beginner strings and are actually kind of seen as a very specialist type of string for certain kinds of classical and stuff most of the time. Steel core strings are very common in fiddle music. They come with different coatings and windings now. They are relatively cheap. Loud, easy to play. They're much less affected by temperature or humidity than some of the contenders, but they do not have a rich, warm sound like the gut strings. They are good beginner strings. They're very stable in tuning, they're easy to play, and they last a lot longer. Lastly is synthetic core strings. So these sort of combine some of the best bits of both of the other categories. They're more stable in tuning than gut strings. They have more warmth than steel strings. I'm a big fan of these personally. They're slightly more difficult to play than steel, but I'd say they're good for maybe improvers and up. Okay, so that is a very whizzed through, reductionist, slightly generalising summary of the strings. There's obviously so much more detail, but I've tried to summarise, so kind of introduction, this is the categories of violin strings. If you've got any questions at all, then please feel free to comment below or message us. Hope that was helpful.